The letter trembled in Willow Winters' hands, tears blurring the carefully penned words that carried news from the bloody battlefields of the Civil War. It was 1866, and though the war had officially ended, its consequences lingered in every corner of Cottonwood Creek, a dusty frontier town nestled in the Texas plains. The afternoon sun filtered through the thin curtains of her modest home, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor as she struggled to comprehend the devastating message. "Miss Winters," the deep voice startled her. Willow hastily wiped her tears away with the back of her hand and turned to face the tall figure standing in her doorway. She hadn't heard him approach, too absorbed in her grief. "I apologize for the intrusion." The stranger removed his hat, revealing sun-bronzed features and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Name's Vaughn Porter. I rode with your brother." Willow's breath caught in her throat. "You knew Samuel," the cowboy nodded, his expression solemn. "Yes, madam, I was with him, at the end." He gestured to the letter in her trembling hands. "I see you've received the official notification." She glanced down at the paper, its edges worn from her desperate grip. "It says he fell at Palmito Ranch, that he was brave." Her voice cracked. "But it tells me nothing of who he truly was in those final days." Vaughn stepped forward, his spurs jingling softly against the wooden floorboards. "He fought hard because he loved you, Miss Winters. Everything he did was to ensure you'd have a future in a united country." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something passed between them, a shared understanding of loss, of sacrifice. Neither knew then how their lives would intertwine in the untamed wilderness of the frontier, or that Samuel's memory would bind them together through dangers neither could yet imagine. "Please," she said, finding her voice at last, "come inside and tell me everything." Willow prepared coffee as Vaughn settled at her small kitchen table. His hat rested beside him, and she noticed his hands strong but gentle as they traced invisible patterns on the wooden surface. He was different from the cowboys who typically passed through Cottonwood Creek. There was a quietness to him, a thoughtfulness in his eyes that spoke of education and depths beyond the rough exterior. "I met your brother when we both enlisted in '63, Vaughn began as she placed a steaming cup before him. "We were assigned to the same regiment. He carried your picture everywhere." He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a small, worn photograph. "He wanted me to return this to you should anything happen." Willow's fingers brushed against his as she took the photograph, her own likeness from 3 years prior, smiling with a hopefulness that seemed foreign to her now. "You kept your promise." "I keep all my promises, Miss Winters." "How did it happen?" she asked, finally voicing the question that had haunted her since receiving the letter. Vaughn's eyes clouded with memory. "It was at Palmito Ranch, like the letter says. The last battle of the war, though we didn't know it then. Samuel led a charge to protect our retreating forces, saved dozens of men." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "He spoke of you in his final moments, asked me to check on you, make sure you were all right." Willow clutched the photograph tighter. "Is that why you're here?" "To fulfill a deathbed promise?" "Partially," he admitted. "But also because I owed him my life twice over, and I aim to honor that debt by helping his sister however I can." Before she could respond, the sound of approaching horses interrupted their conversation. Willow moved to the window, her expression shifting from sorrow to alarm. "What is it?" Vaughn asked, rising from his seat. "Harlan Blackwell and his men," she whispered. "The banker. He's been trying to force me to sell this land since Samuel left." Vaughn joined her at the window, his posture tensing as he observed the 3 mounted men approaching the house. "And now that your brother's gone, he thinks you'll have no choice." "I have nowhere else to go," Willow admitted. "This land is all Samuel and I had after our parents died. 20 acres with good water access enough to build a life on." "Then we won't let him take it," Vaughn said with quiet determination. He reached for his hat. "Stay inside, Miss Winters." "No," she countered firmly. "This is my home. I'll face him myself." They stepped onto the porch together as Harlan Blackwell dismounted. He was an imposing figure in an expensive suit, a gold watch chain gleaming across his vest. His 2 companions remained mounted, hands resting casually near their holsters. Miss Winters, Blackwell called, his tone falsely cordial. I was so sorry to hear about your brother's passing. His gaze shifted to Vaughn, eyes narrowing. I don't believe we've been introduced. Vaughn Porter, he responded without elaboration, his stance protective beside Willow. Mr. Porter, Blackwell acknowledged with a tight smile. I'm afraid you're interrupting a private business matter. Willow stepped forward. There is no business to discuss, Mr. Blackwell. My answer remains the same as it was last month and the month before. This land is not for sale. Blackwell's expression hardened. Be reasonable, Miss Winters. A young woman alone can't manage this property. The bank's offer is more than fair. She's not alone, Vaughn interjected calmly, and I believe the lady has given you her answer. The tension stretched between them, broken only by the sound of wind rustling through the nearby cottonwoods. Blackwell's companions shifted in their saddles, awaiting instructions. I see, Blackwell finally said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. Perhaps you should know, Miss Winters, that your brother borrowed heavily against this property before his departure. The note comes due next month. The color drained from Willow's face. That's impossible. Samuel would never. I have the documentation at the bank, Blackwell interrupted smoothly. Feel free to review it any time. You have 30 days to settle the debt or the property will be auctioned. He tipped his hat with mock courtesy. Good day to you both. They watched in silence as the three men rode away, dust clouds rising in their wake. Only when they disappeared from view did Willow allow her composure to crumble. He's lying, she whispered fiercely. Samuel would never mortgage our land without telling me. Vaughn's expression was grim. Men in Blackwell's position often create debts where none exist. Do you have any of your brother's papers? Letters, documents, Willow nodded. In his trunk. I haven't had the heart to go through it since receiving news of his death. We should look now, Vaughn suggested gently. If there's evidence that could contradict Blackwell's claim, we need to find it. Inside the house, Willow led him to a small bedroom where a military trunk sat at the foot of a neatly made bed. She knelt before it, running her fingers across the brass nameplate. Samuel J. Winters, 4th Texas Cavalry. I still expect him to walk through that door, she admitted quietly, to laugh and tell me he's home for good. Vaughn knelt beside her. Your brother was the finest man I've known, Miss Winters. He spoke often of returning to build this land into something magnificent. With trembling hands, Willow opened the trunk. The smell of Samuel's belongings, leather, tobacco, and the faint trace of bay rum brought fresh tears to her eyes. She lifted out his uniform jacket, folded with military precision, then a bundle of letters tied with string her letters to him. She realized with a pang. Beneath these were various documents, land deeds, tax receipts, and letters from Samuel to her that he'd never had the chance to send. Vaughn helped her organize these on the floor, examining each one carefully. Here, he said after several minutes, holding up a document. This is the original deed to your property signed by your father, and these, he indicated several tax receipts, show all payments current through last year. Willow frowned, but nothing about a mortgage. Exactly, Vaughn confirmed. I've seen enough legitimate contracts to recognize forgery when I encounter it. Blackwell is counting on your grief and isolation to push his scheme through. Why does he want this land so badly? She wondered aloud. Vaughn's expression was thoughtful. 20 acres with good water is valuable, especially with the railroad planning to expand through this territory, but there might be more to it than that. He continued examining papers while Willow sorted through her brother's personal effects, a pocket watch, a small Bible, a deck of playing cards worn smooth with use. At the bottom of the trunk, wrapped in oilcloth, she discovered a journal bound in leather. Vaughn, she called softly, the first time she'd used his given name. Look at this. The journal contained Samuel's neat handwriting, detailing his observations during the war but also his plans for the future. The final entries revealed what Blackwell was after Samuel had discovered signs of silver on their property shortly before enlisting. He'd kept it secret, planning to investigate further after his return. Silver, Vaughn breathed. That explains Blackwell's persistence. Willow closed the journal carefully. What can we do? His influence in town is considerable. We need proof of his forgery, Vaughn stated, and time to properly assess whether your brother's suspicions about silver were correct. The bank closes for the night, Willow said thoughtfully. But Blackwell keeps the important documents in his office at home. Everyone in town knows he brings work home each evening. Vaughn's eyebrows raised. Miss Winters, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? A determined look crossed her face. This is my home, Mr. Porter. I'll fight for it any way I can. As dusk settled over Cottonwood Creek, Willow changed into dark clothing, pinning her auburn hair beneath a cap. Vaughn had initially protested her involvement, insisting he could search Blackwell's office alone. But her knowledge of the banker's home proved invaluable. She'd attended social gatherings there when helping the local seamstress with event preparations. They approached on foot from behind the property, using the deepening shadows as cover. Blackwell's house stood apart from others in town, a two-story structure with pretensions of grandeur. Light shone from the dining room windows, where silhouettes indicated Blackwell and his wife were enjoying their evening meal. His office is around back, Willow whispered. Separate entrance so business visitors don't disturb the household, Vaughn nodded, impressed by her composure. They crept along the garden path, staying low beneath window level. At the office door, Vaughn produced a set of slender tools and worked quietly at the lock. Where did you learn that? Willow asked, keeping watch. A wry smile touched his lips. Not all my war experience involved battlefields. Sometimes intelligence gathering required. Creative entry methods. The lock clicked open, and they slipped inside, closing the door silently behind them. Moonlight filtered through the curtained windows, providing just enough illumination to navigate the room. Blackwell's desk dominated the space, a massive oak piece with multiple drawers. We need to work quickly, Vaughn cautioned. Which documents would prove the mortgage is fraudulent? Willow thought for a moment. The bank keeps duplicate copies of all loan documents. If he created a false mortgage, he'd need supporting paperwork, dates, amounts, signatures. They began a systematic search of the desk drawers, careful to return everything to its original position. In the third drawer, Vaughn discovered a leather portfolio labeled Winters Property and opened it to reveal several documents. Look at this, he whispered, holding a paper toward the window to catch the moonlight. A mortgage agreement with your brother's signature, dated 2 years ago. Willow examined it closely. That's not Samuel's handwriting. The S is wrong, he always made it with a specific flourish. She pointed to another document from the trunk that bore her brother's authentic signature. Vaughn nodded in agreement. And the dates don't align. According to this mortgage, your brother signed this while he was with our regiment in Louisiana. I can testify he was nowhere near Cottonwood Creek on that date. As they continued searching, they found more evidence of Blackwell's scheme, maps of the region with their properties circled, correspondence with mining investors, and preliminary assay reports confirming silver deposits in the area. He knew, Willow breathed. All this time, he knew what Samuel had discovered. The sudden sound of the front door opening froze them in place. Voices drifted from the main house, growing louder as they approached the office. Just need to collect those documents for tomorrow's meeting, Blackwell was saying. Vaughn quickly gathered the most damning evidence, tucking it inside his vest. The window, he whispered, already moving to unlock it. They slipped out just as the office door opened, crouching beneath the windowsill as lamplight spilled into the room. They remained motionless, barely breathing, as Blackwell rustled through papers above them. Something's missing, they heard him mutter. Where are the Winters documents? Footsteps crossed to the desk, drawers opening and closing with increasing agitation. Willow and Vaughn used the distraction to retreat further into the garden shadows, then made their escape through the back gate. They didn't speak until they were safely away from Blackwell's property, moving swiftly through the darkened streets toward Willow's home. He'll know someone took the documents, Willow said, her voice tight with anxiety, and he'll suspect us immediately, Vaughn agreed. We need to act quickly. First light tomorrow, we ride to the county seat in Riverton. The circuit judge there is beyond Blackwell's influence. Willow nodded, then suddenly grasped his arm. Listen. The sound of horses approaching made them duck into an alleyway between buildings. Blackwell Road passed with 4 men, all armed, heading in the direction of Willow's property. He's moving faster than anticipated, Vaughn observed grimly. We can't return to your house tonight. There's an abandoned trapper's cabin about 2 miles upstream, Willow suggested. Samuel and I used to play there as children. Few people know of its existence. Lead the way, Vaughn said. We'll collect my horse from the livery first. The cabin was little more than a single room with a sagging roof, but it offered shelter and concealment. Vaughn built a small fire in the stone hearth while Willow examined their stolen evidence by lamplight. These documents prove Blackwell's entire scheme, she said, arranging papers on the rough wooden table. The forged mortgage, the mining surveys he commissioned without legal access to the property, letters to investors promising silver yields. Vaughn nodded, his expression serious in the firelight, enough to ruin him if presented to the right authorities. Why would he take such a risk? Willow wondered. Surely he must have known forgery of this magnitude would mean prison if discovered. Greed blinds men to consequences, Vaughn replied, stoking the fire. I've seen it transform reasonable people into monsters, especially when they believe they can act with impunity. Willow watched him, noticing the shadows that crossed his face. You've experienced this before. He met her gaze steadily. My family owned a small ranch in East Texas before the war. While I was fighting, a man much like Blackwell manipulated my father into a bad investment, then foreclosed when payments couldn't be met. By the time I returned, my father had died of a heart attack and our land was lost. I'm sorry, she said softly. Is that why you're helping me? Because you couldn't save your own home? Vaughn was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps partly. But mostly because your brother asked me to look after you, and because what Blackwell is doing is wrong. He paused. And because I've come to admire your courage, Miss Winters. The firelight cast a warm glow across her features as she considered his words. Willow, she said finally. After everything we've been through tonight, I think you can call me Willow. Their eyes met across the small space, and something shifted between them, a recognition of mutual respect evolving into something deeper. The moment was broken by the sound of distant hoofbeats. They're searching the area, Vaughn said, moving to extinguish the lamp. We should remain quiet until they pass. They sat in darkness save for the muted glow of embers, listening as riders moved along the creek. Eventually, the sounds faded, and Willow released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Get some rest, Vaughn suggested. I'll keep watch until dawn, then we'll make for Riverton. Willow wanted to protest, but found exhaustion overtaking her. Using her folded jacket as a pillow, she settled near the hearth. Wake me in a few hours. You need rest too. He nodded, though she suspected he had no intention of waking her. As she drifted toward sleep, she watched him silhouette against the window, vigilant and steady. For the first time since learning of Samuel's death, she didn't feel entirely alone. Morning arrived with golden light filtering through the cabin's weathered walls. Willow woke to find Vaughn preparing a simple breakfast from provisions in his saddlebag. You didn't wake me, she accused gently. He handed her a cup of coffee. You needed the rest more than I did. They ate quickly, discussing their route to Riverton. The county seat was a full day's ride, and they would need to avoid main roads where Blackwell's men might be watching. We'll have to share my horse, Vaughn said. It means slower travel, but we can't risk returning to town for yours. Willow agreed, helping to gather their evidence and erase signs of their presence from the cabin. Outside, Vaughn's horse, a sturdy bay gelding, stood patiently beneath a cottonwood. This is Thunder, Vaughn introduced as he checked the saddle. Best horse I've ever owned, carried me through 2 years of war without complaint. Willow approached the animal, stroking his velvety nose. Hello, Thunder, I hope you don't mind carrying double today. With the evidence secured in Vaughn's saddlebags, he helped Willow mount, then swung up behind her. The proximity was intimate, his chest warm against her back, his arms encircling her to hold the reins. She felt her cheeks flush and was grateful he couldn't see her face. They set off along a game trail that followed the creek before angling west toward Riverton. Vaughn kept them moving at a steady pace, careful not to overtax Thunder with the double burden. As they rode, he told her more about her brother's stories of Samuel's humor during difficult campaigns, his kindness to fellow soldiers, his unwavering belief in the cause of preserving the Union. "He saved my life at Sabine Crossroads," Vaughn recounted. "Our unit was caught in a Confederate ambush. I took a bullet in the shoulder, fell from my horse. Samuel rode back under heavy fire, pulled me across his saddle, and got us both to safety." He paused. "That was the first time he showed me your photograph, told me about the land you both hoped to build into something special." Willow listened, tears gathering but not falling. "Thank you for telling me these things. The official letter was so impersonal, it helps to know who he really was during those years." They stopped briefly at midday, resting Thunder and sharing a simple meal of jerky and hardtack. Willow studied the map Vaughn had brought, calculating their progress. "We're making good time," she observed. "Should reach Riverton by nightfall if we encounter no problems." As if summoned by her words, the distant sound of horses reached them. Vaughn was immediately alert, scanning their surroundings. "Could be ordinary travelers," Willow suggested. "Could be," he agreed, though his expression remained cautious. "But we shouldn't take chances. There's a ravine ahead that offers cover. We'll wait there until we can identify who's approaching." They reached the ravine just as the riders came into view. On the ridge behind them, 5 men, with Blackwell at their lead. They'd been spotted. "Ride." Vaughn urged Thunder into a gallop, keeping to the ravine where trees provided some cover from pursuit. The chase continued for miles, Thunder gamely carrying his double burden across increasingly rough terrain. Vaughn guided them into a dense stand of pine trees, hoping to lose their pursuers in the maze of trunks and shadows. For a while, it seemed they might succeed. The sounds of pursuit grew more distant, confused. But as they emerged from the forest onto open ground, shots rang out. Thunder stumbled, wounded in the flank, and Vaughn barely managed to control their fall as the horse went down. "Are you hurt?" he asked Willow urgently, helping her to her feet. "No," she gasped, turning immediately to the injured horse. But Thunder the gelding lay breathing heavily, blood staining his bay coat. Vaughn examined the wound quickly. "It's not fatal, but he can't carry us further." The sound of approaching riders left them no time to deliberate. Vaughn grabbed the saddlebags containing their evidence in Willow's hand. This way, they ran toward a rocky outcropping that offered their only hope of defense. Behind them, Blackwell and his men closed the distance. Reaching the rocks, they scrambled up to a defensible position as the first bullets struck stone near their heads. "Stay down," Vaughn instructed, drawing his revolver. He fired several careful shots, forcing their pursuers to seek cover. "Vaughn Porter." Blackwell's voice carried across the distance. "This doesn't have to end badly. Return my property and you can ride away, no harm done." "Your property?" Vaughn called back. "You mean your forged documents, the evidence of your criminal conspiracy?" A barrage of gunfire was the only response. Pinned down with limited ammunition and no water, their situation was dire. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as the standoff continued, a war of patience neither side could afford to lose. During a lull in the shooting, Willow touched Vaughn's arm. "Look," she whispered, pointing west. A dust cloud approached riders moving fast. At first, Vaughn feared reinforcements for Blackwell, but as the newcomers drew closer, he recognized the distinctive hats and uniforms of a U.S. cavalry patrol. Blackwell saw them too. With a shouted command to his men, he began a hasty retreat, unwilling to engage with federal troops. The cavalry patrol, noticing the fleeing men and the gunfire, spurred their horses faster. Leading them was a lieutenant whose features grew more familiar as he approached, Lieutenant Wilson. Vaughn called in disbelief, recognizing a former comrade from his regiment. The patrol surrounded Blackwell's retreating party while the lieutenant rode to the rocky outcropping where Vaughn and Willow had taken shelter. "Porter, is that you?" Lieutenant Wilson called, genuine surprise in his voice. "When we heard gunfire, I never expected to find you in the middle of it." Perfect timing, Wilson, Vaughn replied with evident relief, helping Willow down from their position. But what brings a cavalry patrol this far south? Escorting the circuit judge to Riverton, Wilson explained, dismounting. Judge Harmon wanted to see more of the territory he oversees. He glanced at Willow, then back to Vaughn questioningly. Lieutenant Wilson, this is Miss Willow Winters, Vaughn introduced. Sister of Samuel Winters from our regiment. Recognition dawned on Wilson's face. Winters was a fine soldier. My condolences, miss. Thank you, Lieutenant, Willow replied. Your arrival may have saved our lives. Briefly, Vaughn explained their situation, the forged mortgage, Blackwell's scheme to acquire the silver-rich property, and their journey to present evidence to the authorities in Riverton. Judge Harmon will want to hear this directly, Wilson decided. He's waiting with the rest of our patrol just over that ridge, and it seems we've apprehended the very men you're accusing. They collected the wounded Thunder, who could walk but not carry riders, and joined the main patrol where Judge Harmon, a stern-faced man with piercing eyes and iron-gray hair, listened attentively to their story. Blackwell and his men, disarmed and under guard, watched with barely concealed fury. Serious accusations, the judge commented when they finished, examining the documents they'd brought. But the evidence appears substantial: forgery, fraud, attempted murder. He turned to Lieutenant Wilson. Secure these men for transport to Riverton. They'll stand trial next week. Blackwell's composure finally broke. This is absurd. I'm the most respected businessman in Cottonwood Creek. You can't take the word of this drifter and a grieving woman over mine. I'm taking the word of evidence, Mr. Blackwell, Judge Harmon replied coldly. And of a decorated Union veteran whom I happen to recognize from the Battle of Galveston. He nodded respectfully toward Vaughn. Captain Porter's testimony carries considerable weight with this court. Willow looked at Vaughn in surprise. Captain, a flush crept up his neck. Field promotion after Sabine Crossroads. It never seemed important to mention. As Blackwell was led away, still protesting his innocence, Judge Harmon turned to Willow. Miss Winters, I'll issue an immediate injunction protecting your property from any claims until this matter is fully resolved in court. Given the evidence, I anticipate a swift resolution in your favor. Relief washed over her. Thank you, Your Honor. With Thunder unable to carry riders, Lieutenant Wilson arranged for Willow and Vaughn to ride with the patrol to Riverton, where they would give formal statements and testify at Blackwell's preliminary hearing. As they prepared to depart, Vaughn checked Thunder's wound one final time, ensuring it was properly dressed. He'll recover fully, Lieutenant Wilson assured him. Our patrol veterinarian will see to it. Vaughn nodded gratefully, patting Thunder's neck before mounting the horse provided by the cavalry. As Willow settled onto her own mount beside him, their eyes met in shared understanding. The danger had passed, but their journey together was not yet complete. In Riverton, they were provided comfortable accommodations while awaiting Blackwell's hearing. 3 days of testimony followed, during which Willow impressed the court with her clear recounting of events, and Vaughn provided crucial evidence of his whereabouts with Samuel on the date of the forged mortgage. Judge Harmon ultimately ordered Blackwell held for trial on multiple felony charges, denied bail due to the severity of his crimes, and formally cleared any cloud from Willow's property title. What will you do now? Vaughn asked Willow as they sat on the hotel porch the evening after the hearing concluded. Return to Cottonwood Creek. She was quiet for a moment, watching the sunset paint the western sky in vivid oranges and purples. Yes, it's my home, all I have left of my family. And now, knowing there's silver on the property, I need to decide how to proceed carefully. Mining requires significant investment, Vaughn observed, and expertise. Are you offering your expertise, Captain Porter? She asked with a small smile. He chuckled softly. My experience is limited to what I learned from my grandfather, who prospected in California in '49. But I know people, honorable ones, who could help assess the deposit's value and advise on development options. Willow studied his face in the fading light. And would these consultations require your continued presence at my property? Only if that presence is welcome, he replied carefully. She turned fully toward him then, her expression serious. When I received that letter about Samuel, I thought I'd lost everything: my brother, my protector, my family. I felt utterly alone. She paused. Then you arrived, telling me how he fought because he loved me, and somehow in the midst of danger and grief, I found something unexpected. What did you find? Vaughn asked, his voice low. Hope, she answered simply. And perhaps the beginning of something I wasn't looking for but now can't imagine living without. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but certain. I came to deliver a message and fulfill a promise to a friend. I never expected to find someone who would challenge me, impress me, and make me envision a future I'd stopped believing in after the war. And what future do you envision now, Vaughn Porter? She asked, her fingers intertwining with his. One where I help a remarkable woman build something on 20 acres of good land, he replied with a smile that reached his eyes. Where we honor the memory of her brother by creating the life he fought for her to have. Where silver might provide prosperity but isn't the true treasure of the property. 2 weeks later, they returned to Cottonwood Creek together. Thunder, fully recovered from his wound, carried Vaughn alongside Willow on her mare, purchased in Riverton. News of Blackwell's arrest had preceded them, transforming Willow from an object of pity to one of admiration among the townsfolk. With Vaughn's connections, they arranged for a proper geological survey of the property, which confirmed Samuel's suspicions. A modest but valuable silver deposit ran beneath the eastern section of the land. Rather than sell to mining interests, they established a small operation of their own, employing local men and creating prosperity that extended beyond their boundaries. The banker who replaced Blackwell proved honest and supportive, helping them manage their growing assets with integrity. Vaughn used his military contacts to secure favorable contracts, while Willow's natural head for business surprised even herself. 6 months after their first meeting, on a crisp autumn evening, Vaughn took Willow to the highest point on their property. The cottonwood trees that gave the creek its name blazed golden in the sunset, and the small mining operation hummed with productive activity in the distance. Samuel would be proud, Vaughn said, standing beside her as they surveyed what they'd built together. Not just of the business success, but of how you've become a leader in this community. Willow smiled, leaning against his shoulder. He sent me the perfect partner, though I doubt even he could have foreseen exactly how perfect. Vaughn turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. I've been carrying something since Riverton, he admitted, waiting for the right moment. From his pocket, he withdrew a simple gold ring. This was my mother's. I'd be honored if you would wear it, Willow Winters, if you would consent to build not just a business with me, but a life, a family. Tears gathered in her eyes as she looked from the ring to his face. From the moment you stood with me against Blackwell, I think my heart knew its destination, she whispered. Yes, Vaughn Porter, 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her close, his kiss a promise of all the years to come. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, Willow rested her head against his chest. He fought hard because he loved me, she said softly, remembering Vaughn's words from that first day. And now I understand that love creates a legacy that extends far beyond one life. A legacy we'll honor, Vaughn agreed, his arm secure around her waist as they watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the promise of tomorrow across the Texas sky. Spring arrived with new growth transforming their property. Wildflowers carpeted the gentle slopes, and tender leaves unfurled on the cottonwoods along the creek. The small cabin Vaughn had built during the winter stood completed 3 rooms of solid construction with a broad porch facing west to catch the evening light. They married on the first day of April 1867, beneath the largest cottonwood on the property. The entire town attended, along with Lieutenant Wilson and several of Samuel's former comrades who traveled considerable distances to honor his memory and celebrate his sister's happiness. Judge Harmon performed the ceremony, having developed a genuine fondness for the couple during Blackwell's trial, which had concluded with a 20-year sentence for fraud, forgery, and attempted murder. As Willow and Vaughn exchanged vows, a gentle breeze stirred the new leaves overhead, whispering like benedictions. "I think Samuel is here somehow," Willow murmured to Vaughn during their first dance as husband and wife. Watching over us, Vaughn smiled, drawing her closer. "I believe he is. And I believe he approves." Their first year of marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. The silver mine produced steadily, if not spectacularly. They established a small herd of quality cattle, laying the foundation for a ranching operation that would provide stability when the silver eventually depleted. Most precious of all, as winter approached again, Willow discovered she was carrying their first child. "A boy or a girl, what do you think?" Vaughn asked one evening as they sat before the fireplace, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "A boy first," Willow decided with certainty. "With his father's courage and his uncle's sense of duty. And his mother's intelligence and determination," Vaughn added. "Poor Cottonwood Creek won't know what hit it when our children start making their mark," Willow laughed, leaning into his embrace. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come that day? If you hadn't fulfilled your promise to Samuel?" Vaughn was quiet for a moment, considering. "I believe some paths are meant to cross, Willow. Even without Samuel's request, something would have drawn me here. Some lives are destined to intertwine." As their family grew over the years, first with Samuel Vincent Porter, born strong and healthy in the summer of 1868, followed by Elizabeth Willow 2 years later, and finally James Vaughn in 1872, their property expanded as well. The silver mine eventually played out, but by then, the Porter Ranch had become one of the most successful operations in the county, known for its innovative practices and fair treatment of workers. They never forgot the circumstances that brought them together. Each year on the anniversary of Samuel's death, they visited the memorial marker they'd erected beneath his favorite cottonwood, telling their children stories of the uncle who'd fought for a future he would never see, but had helped create through his sacrifice and love. On their 20th anniversary, with their oldest son managing much of the ranch operations and their daughter teaching at the town school Willow had helped establish, Vaughn took his wife back to the spot where he'd proposed. 20 years, he marveled, his hair now threaded with silver but his eyes still bright with devotion. "Sometimes it seems like yesterday that I rode up to your door, a stranger carrying news of loss." "And sometimes," Willow replied, tucking her arm through his, "it feels as though we've always been together, as if my life truly began the moment you appeared." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint familiar colors across their land that had witnessed their struggles and triumphs, their grief and joy, their enduring love story born from the ashes of war. "He fought hard because he loved you," Vaughn said softly, echoing his words from 2 decades earlier. "And I've lived fully because I love you." Willow turned to him, the years falling away as she met his gaze. "And I've loved you through it all, my steadfast cowboy, my unexpected blessing." As they walked hand in hand back toward the home they'd built together, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, constant, luminous, eternal, much like the love that had sustained them through all the seasons of their shared life in the wild frontier that had witnessed their beginning and would cradle them until the end.